All right, we are up to Unit 3, Lesson 18. Lesson 18, again, just like Lesson 17, we are learning how to solve quadratics again, just like we did in that Algebra 1 unit. The only difference being our equations are going to have complex number solutions. So in Lesson 17, we talked about solving by completing the square. In this lesson 18, we're going to solve by using the quadratic formula up here. Hopefully you remember that from a couple of units ago. We're going to learn that, but except again, our equations are going to have complex number solutions. So let's take a look at number 1. X squared plus 6x plus 13 equals 0. Again, when I use the quadratic formula, I always like to first identify what my A, B, and C are going to be. So up in our notes, it says A is the coefficient of the x squared term, B is the coefficient of the x term, and C is the constant term. So in this case, the coefficient of the x squared term is really an imaginary 1 right here. So that means A is going to be 1. B is the coefficient of the x term. In this case, that's going to be 6. So B is 6. And C, the constant term, is 13. So when I plug into the formula up here, I'm going to plug in 1 for A, 2 for B, and 13 for C. So let's do that. So x equals negative B plus and minus. Whoops. Let's try that again. Negative B plus and minus square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C divided by 2 times A. So let's simplify. So we have negative 6 plus and minus square root of 6 squared. So 6 squared is 36. And then here we have negative 4 times 1 times 13. So that's negative 4 times 1 times 13. Use a calculator if you need to. I'm using a calculator right now. So negative 4 times 1 times 13 is going to be negative 52 divided by 2 times 1. Okay, and we'll continue simplifying. So we have negative 6 plus and minus square root 36 minus 52 is negative 16 over 2. Next, negative 6 plus or minus square root of negative. So again, if we were in the real number system, we would obviously conclude that this has no real number solution. But because we're talking about complex numbers and imaginary numbers, we can say that the square root of negative 16 is going to be 4i. So we have negative 6 minus plus and minus 4i divided by 2. And to finish it off, we can divide both terms by the 2 in the denominator here. So negative 6 divided by 2 is going to be negative 3. And then plus and minus 4i divided by 2 is going to be 2i. So that right here is our solution, -3 plus and minus 2i. Are there still two solutions? Yes. What are those two solutions? -3 plus 2i and -3 minus 2i. Okay, so that's number one. Let's take a look at number two. X squared minus 10x plus 50 equals 0. Once again, I will identify my A, my B, and my C. Okay, so A, once again, is the coefficient of the x squared term, so that's going to be 1x squared, 1. B is the coefficient of the x term, so in this case, that's going to be -10. And C is the constant term, which in this case is going to be 50. Okay, so we have A equals 1, B equals -10, and C equals 50. Let's go ahead and plug that into our quadratic formula. So x equals -b plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. Okay, and this, if you might remember when we first learned about the quadratic formula, all right, the first part of the formula is -b. Well, in this case, b is already negative. So -b is going to be -10. Well, what's -10? That's going to be a +10 because of the double negative there. So the double negative, -10, is actually becomes +10 when we simplify it. So that becomes +10 plus and minus, let's see, excuse me, -10 squared, so that's -10 times -10, that's going to be 100. Then we have -4 times 1 times 50. So -4 times 1 times 50, that's going to be a -200, right? -4 times 1 is -4. -4 times 50 is going to be a -200 divided by 2 times 1, so that's 2. Keep simplifying. 10 plus and minus square root 100 minus 200 is going to be -100 divided by 2. Okay. 10 plus and minus the square root of -100. Because we're talking about complex numbers, that's going to be 10 plus and minus 10i. Right? The square root of 100 is 10. The square root of -100 is 10i. Divided by 2. And then just like we did before, I will separate out this fraction here. So I have my complex numbers. So 10 divided by 2 is going to be 5. And then 10i divided by 2 is going to be 5i. So my final answers are 5 plus and minus 5i. All right, two solutions, 5 plus 5i and 5 minus 5i. Okay, that is your lesson for today. Your cool down for this lesson will be a couple of examples just like I just did, where you're using the quadratic formula and you end up with solutions that are complex numbers.